Hey everyone, welcome to Codstak Podcast. This is the episode 2nd and I'm your host, Tech with Saran. So Codstak, if you don't know, is a platform building where you can practice front-end challenges. So if you're interested, you can go to codstak.com. It is codstak.com and try new challenges. So let's get started with today's episode. And this is an interesting one. I'm going to teach you everything in JavaScript in just 10 minutes. Okay, that's a joke. No one can teach you any language in 10 minutes. It takes like 10 years to understand a single language. JavaScript is huge. It's getting bigger. And in this episode, I'm trying to teach you, if you don't know what JavaScript is, or you haven't worked with JavaScript, or you worked very little. So I think this episode will give you some insight, like what you can expect from the language, how this language works, and how the new trends are coming into this language, so that when you go to next year, if you're trying to learn this language anytime soon, I think you will get some insight. So you can take some notes if you want to, because I'm going to teach about what are functions, variables, classes, objects in JavaScript, and what are the new things coming into JavaScript, and especially the frameworks, because everyone is kind of more interested nowadays in framework than JavaScript itself. We want to build things with JavaScript, right? Which is the right mindset. I think especially if you're looking to get a job, I think this is an accurate mindset. So without wasting any more minute, let's get started with the basic of JavaScript, like variables and data types. So variables, if you don't know, you can think of variables like something that can hold some value. So variable in JavaScript can be defined three ways. You can either use a var keyword, let keyword, or const keyword. So var was a way we used to define our variables. We no longer use that. So if you're going into an interview, or if you're going to learn this language, I would highly recommend don't use var. And why you should not use var, I think this is a whole discussion we can do anytime soon. Maybe next few episodes we can talk about why you shouldn't do something which we were doing before. But I don't want to go deep into that. So you have two options now, let or const, which is comparatively easier to pick, because see, if you want your variable never to change, you can use const. If you want your variable to change, then you can use let. So it's up to the program, or it's up to the programmer how they create the program, or how they define the variables. I think it depends on you. So let it's a more modern way of declaring the variables, and it is block scoped. It works inside a block, so it is scoped inside a block. You can understand that way. And const is it's a constant. It's a value which will never change. If you, let's say, give a const value x equal to cat, in strings, then you cannot do x equal to dog. You can't do that. You can't redefine it. But if something, let's say x is cat, which you define with let, then in your program, at certain time, you can change that to dog. It's up to a condition. I don't know. Maybe something changes, or maybe it depends on the gender. Like if someone says the man loves more dog and woman loves more cat. So so if they ask you are you man or woman? If you say I'm a man, then maybe that let variable changes to dog, and vice versa. So this is just an example to understand how can you differentiate between let and const. Let's get variables out of the way and talk about the next big thing in JavaScript, which are called data types. So in JavaScript, there are two kinds of data types, primitive and non-primitives. So primitives are like number, string. String you can think of text, boolean, true or false, null. You can think of nothing, undefined, kind of nothing but not nothing, and symbols. They are immutable. You cannot change them. And the non-primitive types are objects and arrays. They both are important. They both have their role in a JavaScript program. But if primitives are they are easy to understand. Numbers, string, boolean, right? They're easy to understand. And non-primitives, you can think of we can create something from primitive. Let's say you have an object. Object in JavaScript a collection of key and value pairs. So let's say you have an object of country names. You can or country names and capital. So you can put country name like Canada and it's capital Ottawa. Similarly, you can think of England as a key name and the value could be London. So now you have an object where key name is the name of the country and the value is the name of the city. So you can think of that way. So objects, in other languages like Python, you could call it dictionary. In C, I think you call it hash map. So different names, but similar thing, I would say. Every language has their own way of doing things with objects, but broadly speaking, all objects are hash map. Other type of objects are arrays. In JavaScript, arrays are object, special kind of object. So instead of giving it a key and value, the objects has indices. So let's say you are writing down name of all countries starting with A, like Australia, Austria, whatever, right? So let's say you are putting it inside a dictionary. I mean, dictionary like an English dictionary. So you can say like first it will be Australia comes first or Austria first, because AUST, I don't know, whatever comes in, you can do your calculation. So let's say Australia comes first, right? So Australia will be at 0th position and then Austria would be at first position. Just giving an example. So arrays has indexes. This is a different kind of data structure. Depends on the demand of the program, demand of the question that you're trying to figure out, or the problem you're trying to figure out to solve. So if arrays solves the problem, you will use arrays as data structure. If objects solve the problem, you will use object. If let's say just a number solves the problem, then you can use the number. Or if it's a string solves the problem, you'll use the string. So I think you understand like what are different data structures in JavaScript. That's it. Primitive, non-primitive. Primitive have 6 types, non-primitive have 2, objects and arrays. And non-primitives you can think of like you can make your own data types. Just like I give you example of adding names to dictionary, or the cities, countries, capitals, like you can create in a form of object. Objects are used everywhere in JavaScript. So if you are thinking of learning JavaScript, I would say give your solid few days learning how objects are created, how objects are, you're setting values to objects and all sort of operations you can do on objects. How can you copy one object to another, how they define. So you can do a lot of things, but this is just an overview, right? So that you know like what you can expect from a language. So we had arrays, objects. Now let's talk about the most important part of any language nowadays, functions. So JavaScript is a functional programming language, I can say, and that's like the most powerful feature. Functions, you can think of just the reusable block of code. You can think of a black box. It isn't a black box. I mean, you can see inside a function, but just think of objects as black box where you give it an input, it gives you output. That's it. If you don't change the function, you always get the same output if you give the same input. That's a function that adds to number. So if it adds a plus b, it will always give you a plus b. So whatever you give it a or b value, it will always give a plus b. So that's a function. And functions are quite interesting in JavaScript. They are the functions are called the first class citizen. They are the first class citizen in JavaScript, because you can assign functions to a variable in JavaScript. You can pass them to arguments. Now you think what is an argument? So I told you like a and b, right? So a and b are arguments. You can have a, b, and c. So a, b, c and arguments. So in our case, a should be a number, right? Because we are adding a plus b plus c. But a can be a function which itself return a number. So I know it's harder to wrap around all those facts, but just trust me, like you can pass functions as argument, and you can even return function from a function. So if it's too much, just remember like functions can be used a variety of ways in JavaScript. All right, now let's talk about JSON. So JSON is kind of object you can think of, but it's a different kind of object. It's its own data structure. So JSON is kind of a standard. They're called JavaScript object notation. Yeah, I don't think you get anything from the name, but we call it JSON, JSON. And JSON is kind of used as a way to talk from front to back end. There are different ways you can do that, but JSON is one of the ways in web where you pass data in a format, right? Because you have to have to code and decode the message, right? That's how the whole networking things work. So for the web, networking is based on JSON, and not just JSON. There are different kind of like GraphQL, and there are different kind of data structures you can use. But in JavaScript, we use JSON, where you can pass data as JSON from back end to front end and vice versa. And then server has their own way of decoding it. Client has its own way of decoding it. And if you don't understand what a client and server is, basically client, you can think of your own computer, it's a client, and server is where everything happens. Because see, if you open Facebook or Instagram, you see a lot of photos and videos, right? That did not generate from your phone. It came from a server which sending that data, I think most of the time, 99% of the time, maybe 90% of the time coming as JSON. So that JSON comes to your computer, your phone decodes that and show that message, parse your images, text, and show it on your phone. So that's how like JSON work. All right, what's left? Classes. Yeah. So I'm not going to go deep in classes and object-oriented programming. First of all, like I don't use object-oriented programming in JavaScript, and it's been a long time. Like I used Angular and Python when I was coding in Python. It's been a while I did both. So I don't know much about classes and object-oriented programming, but you can think of like classes where you can define different functions. And then those functions can be used in a variety of different ways. You can create one class and inherit some of the functions in a new class so that you don't have to repeat your code. So classes is a way of condensing your code or give it a structure. So yeah, please go ahead and read more about classes because even I need to do that. But yeah, object-oriented programming is a paradigm. Nowadays, I'm mostly working on React. We're using functional paradigm. So you can think of it as procedural, where we give it procedure, we give it steps. Okay, do this. So this is, I think, comparatively easier to understand. But if you've been coding in Java or C++, then you will be using, even in Python, you will be using a lot of classes. Okay, so next important topic is DOM manipulation. Okay, so before I talk about DOM manipulation, one of the things I faced issue when I was started learning JavaScript was I was very confused when I was watching a tutorial. They're talking about like data structure, and then they started talking about DOM manipulation, and I was very confused. Like, is this like I was trying to learn more about DOM manipulation, and I was getting all those tutorials. They're talking about data structure, and I was like, are they different? Are the same thing? What's the difference between DOM manipulation in JavaScript and the JavaScript I see running on Node? Like, what's the difference? So just to clarify, there are two types of JavaScript you can think of. I mean, there are one JavaScript, but the behavior is somewhat different. One JavaScript, old JavaScript, or the way JavaScript created first was in browser. So browser, you can do a lot of DOM manipulation because you need to show some message, you need to hide some text, whatever you will be using DOM manipulation. And DOM is the document object model, which just lays out your HTML, and you can play with that HTML because it has different nodes like H1 tag, P tag, or you want to change color of that tag, right? Whatever you want to do that, you can do with DOM manipulation. So that's the older way. I mean, not the older way, the initial way we were using JavaScript. And then comes Node. So Node is the way, like, remember I was talking about server. So server, now you can run JavaScript on the servers. Okay, so now you can learn JavaScript on the server. So you can run JavaScript on the server, and you can, previously you were bound with just like few languages, Java, Perl, PHP. But then some of the JavaScript enthusiasts, they were like, why can't we use JavaScript on the server? Because, I mean, it's just a machine code, right? I mean, translate to machine code. So if we can take JavaScript, put on a machine, and just we can use it. And that's where like Node came in. So Node is a runtime, JavaScript runtime, where you can run JavaScript code as well as you can run the same code in browser. But there are differences, like, you know, the Windows method you get in the console. If you go to console, you type Windows, you will get a lot of different window methods, but you won't get that in Node because Node has its own runtime. Node doesn't know about Windows. Similarly, Windows doesn't know about Node. They're different things. So DOM manipulation is a part of that paradigm, the first paradigm, the initial paradigm, where you can select some queries, you can change the text, you can add event listener. And I mean, DOM manipulation should be a single episode in it itself, and it will be. I'll be talking more about DOM manipulation because that's the core of JavaScript and Node as well. All right, and now let's talk about the interesting part, the frameworks and libraries. Okay, so I had worked in Angular for a little while, and then I switched to React, and I've been working in React for 5-6 years now. So basically React, Vue, Angular, Svelte, Solid, I don't know, there's so many now. They are JavaScript libraries. Nowadays, no one wants to manipulate DOM directly. So there are two paradigms. One is called, oh man, I forgot the name. So one is called declarative and imperative. Yeah. Oh, now I remember. I hope I won't forget this in an interview. Declarative and imperative. So declarative, HTML is declarative. When you say H1, put some tag, it just give you H1, right? With some darker text and bigger text. You didn't define anything. you are not using JavaScript or CSS. You say H1, you put some tag, and H1 you can differentiate from H2. So what's happening here? It's a declarative way. At the back end of the language and back end of the DOM, whatever, like I can't touch that. They defined it that if you use H1 or you use button, these things will work out this way. But in the imperative way, you have to define the steps. You have to code it down. Okay, how the H1 should look like. Then you say, okay, H1 height should be this RAM or this pixel should be smaller than how much from the H2 or bigger than from the H2, right? So all this condition, you need to write it down. So the framework is trying to make your code more declarative so that it reduces the boilerplate code, so that it reduces the errors. The more code you write, the more error prone it gets, right? These frameworks, they're trying to make your life easy. I know there's a debate why you should use too much framework or not, but the reality is every single company, every single one, there are few exceptions. If a company or if the project started like 20 years ago, they might be using jQuery or vanilla JavaScript, but nowadays no one uses that, except in few cases. Previously I was reading that Netflix uses just JavaScript. It ditches React, doesn't use React, it's blah blah. Yeah, for one page you can do that, because JavaScript is loading JavaScript on a client is faster than loading React, because React has to compile down to JavaScript, so it takes the compile time. Everything will compile down to JavaScript, every framework. So, but you have to make a trade-off. The trade-off is using framework comparatively makes your life easier. So if you're looking to get a job, I would highly recommend either start with React, that's my preference, or you can start with Angular, that's my second preference. Third is Vue, fourth is Svelte, and there are so many others. My preference only, maybe I'm wrong, who knows. And then on backend, I already talked about Node. And Node has further categories like Express, even Next.js, but I'm not going into too deep. I don't want to waste your time. We'll talk more about that. This is just an overview of JavaScript language. And the last part is TypeScript. So in the production level, fewer and fewer companies are preferring JavaScript over TypeScript. This may be a trend. I don't know. I'm not too sure if this is a trend, but currently even I'm using TypeScript. I've been using TypeScript for more than 2 years now, and I don't think it's going to be replaced by JavaScript anytime soon, if ever. But TypeScript compiles down to JavaScript. So you're seeing the layering, right? You have framework which uses JavaScript, but now using TypeScript. So now the TypeScript has to be converted to JavaScript, and then that JavaScript has to compile down to the DOM manipulation. So there are a few steps, but we're using TypeScript because we think it makes our life easier. I think it does. It takes me time to learn TypeScript. I'm still learning. I don't think I learned enough, to be very honest, but it's getting my job done. I mean, I know enough that I can solve bugs. I can fix issues in TypeScript. If I don't understand anything, I can ask ChatGPT, okay, why did we get this error, or how can I fix it? So I'm doing that, and simultaneously I'm learning it as well. And I'm thinking maybe in the Codstak, I'm using in Codstak all the code is in TypeScript. I don't want you to do in JavaScript and then relearn those things, because see, in Codstak most of the challenges are they're simple, like one component, two component, and if you try to use TypeScript there, I think you'll get some confidence. That's my way. And I think TypeScript is kind of better now, I can say. I think I've changed my opinion. Previously I was thinking JavaScript is better, but I think as I'm using more TypeScript, I don't know, maybe I'm biased because that's what I'm using. So so that is kind of the overview. I was thinking I can wrap it up in 10 minutes. I'm around 20 minutes mark here, I know. But that's, I think, all about JavaScript in 20 minutes. I think anyone can teach. I don't think anyone can teach you everything in JavaScript. That's the high overview of what the language does and what you can expect from this language. And I think I'm going to wrap this episode now. Thanks a lot for listening, and try Codstak, give me some feedback, and I'll come next week with a new episode regarding front-end or web development in general. Thanks a lot for listening. See you next time.